I am Patricia Lindosola from Chile. On this occasion, I will be the moderator of this forum of female ministers and deputy ministers of agriculture of the Americas, hosted by the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture and Colombia and its Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. On this occasion, the forum will focus on policies with gender-focused in the agri-food systems of the Americas, priorities of the region. IICA drives a space at the highest level possible to discuss with ministers and deputy ministers of agriculture of the America in compliance with the resolution of SIAT that in 2021 mentioned the need to exchange knowledge through a gender approach to discuss on the social and political transformations in the areas of science, technology, and innovation. Likewise, the medium-term plan of ICA 2022-2026 prioritizes equality and gender equality, transforming the cross-cutting line covering gender and rural youth. This program consists of creating a space of interaction among ministers to develop an agenda and support the development of the new generation of public policies and programs that allow to position the region and enable its linkage on the global agenda. This is what the forum today will cover. Gender-focused policies in the agri-food system of the Americas, priorities of the region. And in this forum, we will have two outstanding experts in the subject matter that gains ever greater relevance, as is the role of the economy from the sense of agri-food systems where gender equality and youth have a special relevance. I also tell you that the forum is being transmitted or broadcast on social media. To begin officially this meeting, I would like to invite Cecilia Lopez Montaño from the Ministry of Agriculture of Colombia, host country, to give us some welcoming remarks. Madam Minister, Cecilia Lopez Montaño. Thank you. First of all, I am very pleased to have your representative in Colombia here, a dear friend with whom I have worked for many years. On behalf of the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development of the Republic of Colombia, I welcome you to this third forum of ministers and deputy ministers of agriculture and other high-level officials from the Americas that we have developed in cooperation with the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture. We thank all the participants for attending this forum. Ms. Samantha Marcia, Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries from Antigua and Barbuda, Laura Suazo, Secretary of State for Agriculture and Livestock, Honduras. Janit Campo, Minister of Agricultural Development and Irrigation of Peru, Iraodi, representative of the Ministry of Education, Science and Agriculture of Suriname, Ivania de Carmen Leon, Vice Minister of the Ministry of Agriculture of Nicaragua, Miriam Guzman from the Dominican Republic, Maria Noy Baeza, Regional Director for the Americas and the Caribbean of On Mujeres, Javier Mineda from the University of Los Andes, Manuel Lotero, Director General of ICA. I would like to quickly mention a bit of my concerns. I believe that COVID somewhat destroyed, not somewhat, but much of the progress that women had been achieved over decades. And it was clear here where we failed. So much struggle for women to be recognized as an active and productive actor and stakeholder. Here comes COVID. Women leave the labor market. Women leave production from active participation in the economy. So much we have fought against this, and gender violence increased during COVID. So much that has been done so that labor participation of women grow. It plummeted here. More than 1 year has gone by before we have more or less reached the levels that are still not satisfactory. What I would like to propose, and this has to do with the words of Mariela Zúñiga, is where did we fail? I believe we failed in not recognizing that the crucial element is the economy of care, the difference between men and women. The real gap in gender arises from the indifference in the use of time. to not recognize that the use of time is the clear variable, to not recognize that in the 21st century, we still see women as caregivers and men as providers. This is nothing new. This is a principle that for economies and economists like Adam Smith that thought that caregiving was part of the generous quality of women, and that today economists accept and exclude that work from the economy as a productive sector. And that led to COVID destroy much of the progress that we had already made. And this was not yet enough. So this subject matter of this differentiated focus, gender approach that motivates this meeting, and I welcome it as someone who has been working on this, needs to be revised. Gender approach cannot be the only thing. We have to say the time has come to recognize this activity without which society cannot give. Caregiving is not just for children, for ill people, for elderly people. No, caregiving is what humanity needs regardless of the age. And this is not something that robots will be able to do. So we need to reposition caregiving and reposition that role. That cannot just be women. Women are just as much providers as men, but no one recognizes them. They are basically, they spend 7, 8 hours doing caregiving, and no one recognizes this. No one pays for this. No one values this. So I believe it is very timely. Mariela, I believe this is an outstanding meeting, and the Americas should have a debate from the gender perspective and develop a different definition. That should be the outstanding result of all this effort. Thank you very much. And I hope that with this, we can start discussion of the value, not only for rural women, but for all women of the Americas. Thank you, Madam Minister. Very interesting proposal. With you, Dr. Manuel Otero, Director General of IICA, who will give us some welcoming remarks and will officially open our meeting. Thank you, Manuel. Thank you, Patricia. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Greetings, first of all, to Minister Cecilia Lopez from Colombia, whom I thank for her words and for the strong message regarding the caregiving economy. I greet the Secretary of Agriculture of the Honduras, Laura Suazo, head of the executive committee. On behalf of the two, I greet all ministers, vice ministers that are present in this third forum, and I also greet the regional director of Dione Mujeres, Diana Noel Baeza. And the first thing I would like to say is that IICA is an institution fully committed to the transformation of agri-food systems, with a strategic sector, with a systemic view that has to generate jobs, quality of living, and once and for all eradicate chauvinistic practices that have historically characterized this activity, which is much more than just a productive activity. This is what gives us life, identity, the raison d'etre for our rural areas. We need to recognize this. This is a sector that has the face of a man, and that we should truly change it based on diagnostics that are very clear, strong, and that are even tiresome. But the reality is that COVID, as Minister Cecilia was just saying, has made us backtrack in time. But we continue to live in a vicious circle where today we have more poverty, we see a loss of opportunities, violence, migration, and all of this has to do with something that was possibly postponed or not solved, but has to do with a new policy framework that can mainstream the true role of women in new sustainable development strategies, and above all, the systemic vision of agriculture. I would like to simply highlight and remind that women produce half of the food products in the world. And if we refer to developing nations, well, very likely this represents 70 or 80%. And nevertheless, women have less than 15%, less than 15% of the land and less than 2% of the title over these lands. So they only receive 10% of the our revenue to receive 2/3 of all the work. There are two things, particularly now that we come from COP27, that are clearly on the radar, not only during environmental negotiations, but in the global agenda also. One has to do with the halt to productive efforts in the last decade. The increase in productivity has basically dropped to half, and this is particularly serious in tropical areas. And the other thing is food insecurity that is today affecting 30% of the people that live in our continent. And, well, there are articles that show that if rural women had the same access to resources as men do in our rural areas, well, the productive yield would increase 20, 30%. And the impact on the reduction of the impact on the reduction of hunger would increase between 12 and 17%. So evidently, the inclusion of women in productive processes would generate a significant transformation of agri-food systems, making it an undelayable task. As Director General of ICA, I have a responsibility to enforce, and that is Resolution 5004 that mandates the institution to consolidate this space of dialogue, the Forum of Ministers. Unfortunately, 15% of the ministries are headed by women only. But what we need to do, and as Director General of ICA, I pledge to advance with this, is that based on this space of dialogue, we should have more influence to change the direction of events. What I am posing or proposing, this is a proposal I guess I have to, is to see how we can influence within international funding agencies as the World Bank, the IDB, and CAP, the Central American Bank, the Caribbean Development Corporation, to ask the senior authorities of these funding agencies to help formulate public policies that discriminate in positive terms in favor of women in gender policies, the caregiving economy, to see as soon as possible if we can change this situation. And I also pledged that at the ministerial meeting in that ICA must organize for September, October next year. This matter will be high on the agenda. We are very soon to present the second report on connectivity. This is work that ICA does together with the IDB, with Syngenta and other institutions. And unfortunately, while the young people from our rural areas, males, have access to different devices as of the age of 6 years, girls just start doing this by the age of 10. So enough of diagnostics, let us move into action. And as Director General of ICA, I pledge to support this renovated political will to influence and change the route. And I believe that the next ministerial summit, males and female and male ministers of the Americas, will be an opportunity to ensure that women can lead this transformation of the food systems. I leave my comments at that. Greetings to all, and I reiterate the commitment to continue working based on the mandates and on the commitments and everything that ICA has to do. Thank you very much. Thank you, Manuel, for these welcoming remarks and for the commitment of ICA to move forward in gender equality in the agri-food sector and in giving voice and recognition to women at all levels, but especially consideration to public policies. Now, we will hear the ministers, deputy ministers, and other high-level officials from the Americas to express the views from their country. I would like to remind each one of them that they will have 8 minutes each for their intervention. So please meet the time because of the tight agenda we all have. We will begin with the representative of Antigua and Barbuda. I would like to invite the Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries, and Matters of Barbuda, Samantha Marshall, to give her presentation. Go ahead, please, Madam Minister.
Buenos días. Disculpe, doña Patricia, no logramos comunicarnos con usted a tiempo. La doctora Marshall tiene en este momento un problema de conexión.
Minister Marshall has a connection problem right now, so we would appreciate if you could leave her to the end of this block. Thank you. Thank you. No problem. Thank you for letting me know. So with this, we will invite Ms. Laura Suazo, Secretary of State in the areas of Office of Agriculture and Livestock in Honduras, to make her remarks. Ms. Laura Suazo, I invite you to share your words. Thank you very much. Good morning. First of all, I would like to greet and warmly welcome my colleague, the Minister of Agriculture, the Republic of Colombia, Ms. Cecilia Lopez. And I would also like to thank Manuel Lutero for the invitation, and I would like to greet you and greet all the ministers, deputy ministers, and all other participants that are part of this event where we are discussing on such an important matter as is gender. And I will share some thoughts combining my personal experience, the context in Honduras, and lessons for this area. First of all, I believe that one of the starting points is the agri-food system, worldwide. All this matter of agriculture has as its backdrop, let's say, an idea and a common message, in the sense that agriculture arose thanks to women. Women started to grow seeds and domesticated animals. So many animals have hung on to this. So at some point in our history, we could enter into agriculture. And I would like to share that a few days ago, when I was representing Honduras at the General Assembly of the United Nations, I believe this was September 23rd, I was carefully listening to the comments by a youngster, Malala Yousafzai. And she was telling us, you know, that each community, each corporation, each country would benefit from ensuring that each girl has access to safe information, in education, quality. And if we all have doubts on the impact of education, ask a girl, and she will tell you what education means for her. Well, it seems that although participation of women in education of women in agriculture has been occurring since the beginning of the 1980s, it is really recently. Basically, women have been studying agriculture for the last 40 years only. And this was drop by drop in many countries, particularly in Europe. That has been first in many cases, but in the area of women, it was much slower. So then women entered agriculture as a pilot project, an experiment, we could say, with a lot of reservations from decision makers, where they were wondering, how would women handle or address this matter of managing farms and working in agriculture companies and firms, and how will they address raising their own children. And these were all key areas. And I believe that seen from the sense of the agri-food systems, women have worked with family, we have handled specializations, etc. But even so, women in general do not have major opportunities to occupy high-level positions or jobs. Although I feel I have the academic background, perhaps I exaggerated a bit studying too much, and I exaggerated because of personal reasons. Neither my mother nor my grandmother nor my great-grandmother were able to even finish grade school. Although they were outstanding women, very smart, strong decision makers, charismatic women, when my chance came, my mother somewhat pushed me to study and do what she was unable to do. So we do all this to all other women. But although I have had the honor and the social commitment and to hold such an important position, I had never been invited. I would ever be invited to be Minister of Agriculture. And in the different opportunities, I had also encouraged other women to participate in these areas. But finally, a first woman came from Honduras to become the first female president to entrust an agri-food sector to another woman, a sector that is so important in order to improve the economy and overcome poverty. So here I would like to highlight a very important element. Women creating spaces for other women, women trusting the ability of other women, decision-making, more women in research, more women offering extension services and receiving support. Another strategic pillar is funding, inclusive funding. Agricultural financing is very limited, very delicate. It is the biggest area of struggle in agricultural production in my country and in the whole continent, I believe. Women, even though this year I, as chair of the board of directors of the National Agricultural Development Bank, I have tried to struggle to find a space, $40 million, lempiras, excuse me, almost 1.5 million US dollars. And you know what? How difficult it has been for women to access these funds? Incredibly. Credits only for women, they still miss the speed to create the conceptual note of project and ensure all the guarantees. We create policies, but we have not changed the concept. Women still do not have access to land ownership. This is drop by drop, too slowly. Women need those titles and guarantees. We women are basically in a situation of having great need, but very limited access. Other areas of governance and institutional structure. We need greater participation of women. We need to create spaces so that from the context and reality of women, women can then participate in organizations and in the government institutional structure, creating mechanisms that will facilitate the life of women to participate in public spaces. Many of us are already getting older. We do not have to worry about caring for children, something which limits many other women. And something else is marketing. And with this I end, because this is the fourth strategic pillar of ours. And that is men and women, farmers, growers, that only plant and harvest and do not know of how they will sell and how much they will sell their produce for. This is an outcome that will not be successful. We women, I believe, have a better opportunity to manage funds that from the agri-food sector we could enable to head companies. And I end with Malala's message. There are still areas where women do not have access to education. To change this, we also need to come together and support this space. More women supporting more women, as Xiomara Castro did with me. And I am here working for my country so that we can raise the agri-food sector. But I would also like to say that since this is something new that is in the case of Honduras to be the first woman, I felt that at the beginning of her administration, there was a lot of fear among our male friends and how we could have a woman minister heading this challenge. No, the challenge has been for everyone, men and women. What we need to do is how to solve the work. The results are not whether it is a man or a woman. No, everyone must be fully committed and participating. So I greet you all and I allow you to continue.
Thank you very much, Ms. Laura Suazo, for telling us what is being proposed in Honduras in terms of public policies, gender-sensitive policies, and its clear commitment in favor of women. So I would like to clarify that your presentation should not take any longer than 8 minutes. Fortunately, Samantha Marshall, Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries, and Barbuda Affairs, was able to solve the connectivity problems. And even though she will not be able to turn on her camera, she will be able to address us. So, Minister Marshall, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we can.
All right, good morning, everyone. Very sorry, I'm on the road at the moment, actually making some site visits. I just wanted to say from the perspective of Antigua and Barbuda that we have been actively promoting our more women and youth in the agricultural sector, not only in terms of farming and livestock production, but also even in the fisheries division and also in relation to agro-processing. What we do recognize is that women are at a disadvantage in these areas when it comes to financing to improve their business. And so the Prime Minister, the government took a position that the Prime Minister would have what we call an entrepreneurial development program, which would be responsible to ensure that we encourage and facilitate more women and youth in the agricultural sector to increase our production and to be more viable and sustainable. And so we have been doing this. The response has been good, but we also recognize that there are some challenges in the implementation, even of the entrepreneurial development program, because the administrative aspect of it still is very strict. And so we've recently looked at adjusting that to make it more friendly to our women and our youth. Policies in relation to more women in agriculture and supporting women in agriculture and agro-processing would include to ensure that we have a situation where our women are more engaged in active production and are given the necessary support from the technical level. I have to thank IECA and other institutions such as FAO and CADI, because they have been on the ground working with our farmers throughout. The reality is that a lot of our women farmers, when they get into the production aspect, they are not as prepared or given that support from even family as would be expected. But traditionally, our women have been the ones who have been farming to ensure that they support their families, they're able to meet their bills, and that they're able to, have a good level of living. But what we recognize there is that they are left at a certain level, while our male farmers are able to produce more. So we are now encouraging for more of our female farmers to scale up and to go into large-scale farming. And this is an active policy of the government to ensure that they're given all the support that is required to increase the level of production. So far, this has been going well. But one of the greatest challenges we suffer in Antigua, and I suppose that is because of how we are located, we enjoy 6 wonderful months of beautiful weather, but then the other 6 months are very concerning as it's the hurricane belt. And so we have to ensure that everything is done to mitigate. Farmers have to produce within that way that they are mitigating any loss that may occur from a hurricane or storm, flooding. The other situation we have is that our country is a natural drought-prone country. And so we have been using more innovation and technology because of the scarcity of the water supply for all farmers. So we have been able to encourage more farmers to use technology, to get into hydroponics, to make sure that there is less waste from what they're doing in terms of the use of water, and to know and to train them as to the correct amount of water to use, depending on the type of crop that they're using. So we have invested significantly, and we continue to work along with our farmers. But in terms of ensuring gender mainstreaming with our farmers in the agricultural sector, we have been promoting actively for more females and to give them a fair opportunity of not just being a simple farmer, but contributing significantly to the farming industry.
Señora Marshall,
Ms. Marshall, are you still with us?
Yes, sorry
Yes,
about
thank you.
that. So I
We
think
can
in
hear you
that
now.
regard,
Please go ahead.
yes. So I think in that regard, we are continuing actively. Fisheries, in our view, is also a very large scale and a great opportunity for persons to make a very good living. It is perhaps the greatest area of where we do our export. And so we are also doing training very shortly with our women who are involved in the fishing aspect to engage them more and to give greater support where is necessary. I think some of the challenges that we're having, though, is to ensure that there is always that that level of support given to our women, and that when we introduce our programs geared at ensuring that we're empowering our women in the agricultural sector, our women and our youth, that any program that we do, for that matter of fact, is that a program that is properly monitored and evaluated so that it can be a success story. In the event that it is not a success, then we have to be able to trace back and see what are the challenges. The reality is now, as things are on the ground, availability of resources is limited for promoting additional programs because of the challenges that we're having. And we heavily rely on the tourism industry as our main support for GDP. But the reality is, all our programs, we try to push towards ensuring that we are able, as much as possible, to promote our women within the agricultural sector. So unless there's any further questions or particular questions that I may answer, I think that I will keep quiet there.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Ms. Marshall, for your very interesting presentation and for telling us what Barbuda is doing in order to introduce technology in agriculture and fisheries and women and youth in those sectors. Now from Peru, and via a video, we have Jenny Ocampo, Minister of Agrarian Development and Irrigation of her country. Cecilia López Montaño, Minister of Agriculture and Development of Colombia, Mr. Manuel Otero, Director General of ICA, Ministers, Madam Ministers, and Deputy Ministers, and other high-level officials from the Americas. Hunger, climate change, and pandemic by COVID-19 is generating some very important crises around the world that forces us to look within our territories, our resources, our people, and the women and indigenous women. Particularly in the case of Peru, we are one of the countries that are most vulnerable to climate change. We are feeling ever more its manifestations. The presence of a mountain range that allows us to preserve the seeds of some of the crops that are basic for our agriculture in Peru. And this allows us to face hunger. And the pandemic of COVID-19 has shown us the need to make sure that Peruvians can have something to eat, making sure that family farming is one of the pillars of the provision of fresh food. In all these scenarios, we have seen the figure of agricultural women, peasant women, who have the knowledge of the traditions that may allow her to interact with nature, with fresh water of the basins, with wetlands, diversity, forests, in guaranteeing the intergenerational transmission of practices and knowledge that will last in time. But female farmers allows for is amidst a gender and a society that is not gender equal. And so we need to have equal opportunities for their individual development. More than 1 million women in agricultural women participate in agriculture in Peru. The figures that I'm going to mention will allow you to see the gaps, the gender gaps that exist in our country. In the user boards, women have very little participation in decision-making process on the water resources and health resources. For example, only 18% of the chairmanships of the basin water resource associations are occupied by women. In the case of water user chairmanships and the boards that look for health services, only 5% are occupied by women. Now, with regards to the use of land for agriculture, out of the total hectares that are used in Peru, only 30% are led by women. Out of all the plots, largest plots between 20 and 50 hectares, only 18% are under the direction of a woman. 82% of this type of plots that are the most profitable are led by men. Now, if we look at the income of women in the rural areas, it represents 54% of what men receive. And women, due to a sociocultural mandate, are responsible for the house chores and taking care of the families. Regardless of their civil status or marital status, women spend more than 39 hours to house chores and care tasks compared to their counterparts, their male counterparts. The current government acknowledges the importance of the women in agriculture, and that's why in its second agrarian reform policies, it will try to implement a fund for the development of women in the rural areas. This is a specific effort to support Act 31168 that empowers indigenous and rural women in trying to empower women through equal opportunities and the development of rural women and indigenous women by supporting their social, economic, and cultural development through productive development and financing. And this through the Directorate of the Agricultural Women of the Ministry that I lead for 2022, we have developed a strategy of the entrepreneur of women, rural women. And the idea is to support entrepreneurships in fisheries and other areas so that women can produce that may support their economy and economic empowerment. And for this, we have assigned 30 million souls through the Agro Ideas and Agro Rural programs, responsible to develop the mechanisms and the tools for their implementation. In this sense, the outcomes so far show us that these strategies have led to a positive mobilization of women in our territory. 2005 women organizations have sign up for this funding, and that represents 25,250 rural women around the world, around Peru. After looking at the technical aspects of their entrepreneurships, we have been able to help 387 agrarian organizations that gather more than 5,000 indigenous and rural women. The 30 million that had been allocated for this year for the Minister of Economy and Finance were able to cover 19% of the demand, generating a gap that has not been covered and that we hope to cover in 2023 by doubling the amount of the funding and by developing new strategies for intervention, for which we want to establish a model for territorial intervention that is not unequal. To be a woman is not the same to be a woman in the Andean region than in the Amazonian region. So we're a pluricultural and diverse country, and thus these programs have to respond to this diversity. We need to acknowledge that we are a country of mountains, and the basins also determine the existence of many cultures and agricultures that will allow for a productive diversification, that allow for food security for families, and by promoting into the market some healthy foods. The production in the Amazon and Andean region will be the starting point to determine some production lines, acknowledging also that this need to be articulated to take care of the forest and water, particularly in basins. And women need to develop some joint efforts against hunger and climate change. And of course, the strategy for 2023 will develop a wide articulated process with different programs in the sector, trying to generate mechanisms that will guarantee some sustainable development, a better impact in the sectorial sector to have some strategic objectives. And to conclude, I reiterate our commitment to continue working in the strengthening via state policies and other intervention, the empowerment, equal opportunities, and the comprehensive development of rural women and indigenous women. Thank you very much. So thank you for your presentation from Peru. And please remember that you have 8 minutes to address this group. And now I would like to invite Ivania del Carmen León, the Vice Minister of the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock of Nicaragua. So good morning, dear ministers, deputy ministers of agriculture, and other high-level officials from the Americas who are participating in this third forum of female ministers. And this has to do with gender-sensitive policies in the agri-food systems of the Americas priorities in the region. Greetings from the President of the Republic of Nicaragua, Commander Daniel Ortega Saavedra, and Rosario Murillo, Vice President, and of the people of Nicaragua. Our thanks for your invitation to participate in this forum of female ministers on gender-sensitive policies in the agri-food systems of the Americas. The government of Nicaragua has implemented the policy of gender equality, which has led to the growth of the participation of women in a strategic and key role in human development of a country. That's why it fosters its leadership and creativity and to be able to attain a dignifying life. Since 2007, the government has fostered a model through actions on social justice for gender equality among men and women that has led to socioeconomic transformations that have been transcendental and that have been acknowledged by specialized organizations worldwide. Among them, the gender gap index of the which has led to a reduction of the gap. And right now we occupy the 7th place and first place in the region. So we have updated the rank of 90 that we had in 2007, and now we're in rank 80. And women now in policy in 2021, the interparliamentary and UN Women, Nicaragua is in first place in the world rank on the participation, political participation of women in ministerial positions with 58.8%. Nicaragua also has a legal framework that guarantees the human rights of women, together with their development and the development of projects and programs to empower women and their leadership. There are many laws that have been developed, like the right to land ownership by women, rural women, indigenous women, and Afro descendants as well. There are also laws that address violence against women in reform of Act 641 of a penal code. We have the law 693 on food sovereignty and security, and another program for gender equality. Nicaragua will continue fighting against poverty for human development with gender equality, with programs and policies from the government in favor of food security or sustained food security that may be creative and innovative, with the implementation of 26 productive strategies for the development of the agri-food systems. Sustainable development, the full development of family farming, of small producers, male and female producers, for the availability of basic produce and good nutrition, and the access to markets for the economy of producing families. We have been strengthening cooperativism and associations, particularly of rural women, because of their important participation as heads of households, promoting their entrepreneurship and protagonism, and by allowing the 360,067 partners of 41.7% are women. And out of 5,900 cooperatives since 2017, through the food program that is aimed at reducing the hunger among rural families between 2007 and 2016, we were able to capture over 100,000 families at the national level. 90% of all the families now have sometime between 5 to hectares, or that, and women are the heads of household. The interpreter apologizes. Her microphone is off. Madam Minister, your microphone is off. Can you please turn it on? Oh, I apologize. Yes, thank you for letting me know when I turn the page. So the first part of this program allows us to contribute to the eradication of hunger and chronic malnutrition and extreme poverty and unemployment through the quantitative and qualitative increase of production and the consumption of higher protein foods. As of 2017, we developed a program for microcredits for small families and for small agri-food businesses, so that they can improve their income and prosper, allowing for over 36,000 families to improve their livelihood. From 2007 to 2017, with the microcredit for small businesses and other programs, we have been able to give many bonuses. And for the year 2022, we have 22,720 people who have graduated from technical education, and out of those, 68% are women. And for this allow them to gather knowledge that will help them increase their yield, their production, and handle the land in a better way and take care of it. We have had some comprehensive care of the basic staples. Out of 30% of producers are female producers. And we have had gatherings with different farmers, and I apologize, interpreter apologizes, but she turned off her microphone again. I apologize for that. So as I was saying, we have been visiting the crops and the production cycles of basic cereals, out of which 35% are made by women. So this indicates that the participation of women in the field has been increasing. And as a result of policies and strategies and productive plans that from the national production sector of consumption and trade, where we organize all the institutions that take care of the production institutions in our country. And we also promote social programs for solidarity and equality under comprehensive accessibility, improvement of health, and reduction of child mortality, reduction of female mortality, with 178 maternity houses that allow for safe births in the rural areas, and 77 hospitals with 19 new hospitals. In terms of education, we have over 1 million students guaranteeing who have their lunches guaranteed, and also some literacy programs for youth and adults, and the program Love for the youngest ones. Our government acknowledges fully the importance of promoting the strategies and programs as an alternative for the transformation of agri-food systems and for the full development of family farming and small producers, to guarantee the availability of food and highly nutritive foods through economic insertion policies of those who produce with gender equality. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Minister, for telling us the participation of women in Nicaragua, in the politics and in agriculture. Thank you very much. Now it is the turn of the Dominican Republic, represented by the Vice Minister of Rural Development. Vice Minister, the floor is yours. Go ahead, please.
Vice Minister, we need you to open your microphone, please. Ms. Guzman. Apparently, there is a technical issue there, so let us move forward, and we hope you can solve your issue. Now, I would like to invite Lydia Ori, Dean of the School of Agriculture of Suriname, that will speak on behalf of the Ministry of Education, Science, and Culture. Dr. Ori, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to greet all ministers, all sub-ministers, and all participants. Yesterday in the afternoon, I was asked to come to this meeting. I am at this point the director and head of the Agricultural Production Department of the University of Suriname. I did not have time to prepare a very long speech, but I want to say that I'm very happy to talk about the policies and about gender. It is a very important issue also in Suriname. In Suriname, we have an agriculture sector, and the role of women in the interior is much bigger in the past than in the coastal in the coastal land in Suriname. Mostly men are involved in agriculture, but it is changing now, and there are some women visible that are be more visible in agriculture production. And now with talking about transition in agriculture food systems, I think we need really policies. We need policies for education and training in all the districts, in the rural areas especially, but also in the city. in agriculture subjects so that women can reach their goals and have more careers in all aspects of agriculture development. Also, what is important, women need leadership skills that is in whole Suriname to talk about agriculture development, talk about businesses, talk about entrepreneurships, and also in science and technology and innovation. That could be awards on the university, but also to stimulate funds that women can pick up a career. I think it is very important, and we need also to develop policies that there are equal opportunities for both men and women in the agriculture development in Suriname. Women are important care role players of the family in Suriname. And usually there are not many women in high places, like they are ministries or they are directors, because they choose to take care of their family. And I think we should stimulate that, give them the leadership skills that they can take that within them, and they can speak out, and they can recruit other women and stimulate women to do this. And so that Suriname in this time, we see also because of the social economic situation that in a household, both men and women needs to be working. So in the past, it used to be that the man is the provider of financial support and the women is take care of the house in the household. But this role is changing. And I think the younger ones, I think they are moving and they can do more. And we need to stimulate also the youth development in our country. And we need to develop the policies that are especially geared toward the agriculture food systems in Suriname. That is what I want to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you very much for telling us about the policies and the agenda for Suriname and the needs you have as to policies in this subject matter, as well as leadership also. Now, unfortunately, we have been unable to have the Vice Minister of the Dominican Republic contacted with us, but with you, I will leave the Minister of Colombia, Ms. Cecilia Lopez Montaño, the host country, that has a few words to share with us. Minister Lopez Montaño, please, the floor is yours. Thank you. Thank you, Patricia. I understand that the idea is to briefly summarize conclusions, right? Yes? Tell me. No. The idea is for you to tell us a bit about the subject matter and perhaps a summary. That will be fine. And then we can move on to something else. Okay, very well then. First of all, very quickly, allow me to say that one general conclusion I can draw is that, as one of the ministers had said, if I am not mistaken, the one from Honduras, this is a recent process linking women to rural activities. And secondly, ministers of agriculture have the rural women issue on their agenda, and this is evident. But very respectfully, I tell Manuel, I wonder whether the ministers of agriculture that have rural women on their own agenda, I am almost sure they do not. So this is task for ICA, homework for ICA, a meeting with men if they are the majority. And we have yet much more to do, much more capacity to be leaders. Going into recognition basically will encourage their role in participation, etc. But This is what the ministers have said, but evidently there is a failure, a weak point in leadership. We have not reached the appropriate levels, and many women that have occupied those positions see that finally women are being highlighted in their countries. In Nicaragua, we know they are number one in Latin America for several years in the gender gap index. And this is a position we need to recognize. That is the general conclusion. I still see why. Why? Why women? And allow me to make a very quick presentation on this, because I believe that the core of the issue here is to continue thinking that care is responsibility only of women. And in the case of rural women, they completely forget about the time, the agenda that women have, and that it takes up to 7 or 8 hours of their days. And let me show you some figures of Latin America. I have this prepared for Latin America. In 2021, the economic contribution of non-remunerated work is equivalent to 16% to 27% of the GDP. And I have a question to our ministers today. In which of your countries are you measuring the value of the caregiving economy? And what countries are there surveys on time use? In Colombia, I developed a law, and then I fostered the law for Peru. And I went to Costa Rica. I was unable to find support. I went to Argentina, and the same happened. How many countries are regularly measuring the caregiving economy? In Colombia, this is being done every 3 years, and this is by law. Women represent 74% of the contribution of the caregiving economy. That is, women devote almost 20% of their time to domestic work and non-remunerated caregiving. So we need to use this concept of the economy of caregiving to ensure it is that we see that this is work. Here are the figures on time use very quickly. Notice this in Latin America. Rural women dedicate 67 hours per week to work. In Latin America, rural women 47.8 hours per week to non-remunerated jobs, representing 68% of the total hours worked. According to ECLAC FAO in Latin America, more than 52% of rural women older than 15 years are considered economically inactive. And this is the point that I believe has not been highlighted enough. Why? Why? Because all these productive projects, all this empowerment of women is forgotten. They forget that women already have this agenda. That is why my proposal that I want to leave here with you is that, and that is why we have to create this notion of the gender perspective. We have to begin to recognize that if women are only recognized for activities done outside the household, there is no future, no future. Women will be exhausted. So we are imposing additional programs on them, courses for them to learn to manage finances and all kinds of productive projects. What happens? The productive projects revolve around what? 7 hours already taking up caring for the home. No one helps at the home. No one helps in the economy, the market, or the state, particularly in the rural areas. And to that, you add productive projects that demand 4 or 5 hours a day. Conclusion, their daily agendas represent 7, 8 plus 5 or 6, 16 hours. Just imagine, how can they be productive with that? How could they be efficient? We are exhausting them. What are we doing? We're doing away with their idle time, that leisure time that men do have to study, to sleep, to go to the gym. And oftentimes women do not get that chance. How many hours a day can women sleep in Latin America? Not 8 hours, maybe 4 or 5. What is the proposal? A concrete proposal. Let us work and pillars of caregiving. Let us get out of the home those activities that take so much time to them, and these must be done by the state or the market or both. Washing, clothes washing. Well, the state or the system should pay the people that do this, because this takes away hours for women. Caring for children under the age of 5. Well, The daycare centers do not exist in rural sectors in many of our countries. That is a state responsibility for the poorer sectors and for the market for sectors that can pay for that. Full-time education, one single shift. Colombia does not have one single day shift for school. So women must spend either the morning or the afternoon taking care of their children. So pull these activities out and call them pillars of care means giving women time for them to carry out these productive activities they are already carrying out. And this is crucial. Women cannot continue to be the caregivers of humanity because this is no longer true. Women are producers. But if we do not get rid of that burden, we cannot do something efficiently. What we need is productive inclusion of women. We need to clearly understand the load of care. Ask your countries to carry out surveys of time use. That will show you the difference between men and women. Make these pillars of care cross-cutting. Turn these activities into productive activities. In a general equilibrium model, I was examining whether this has to be passed. This responsibility needs to be passed on to the state or the market. There should be both, because this will help the entire country, particularly its GDP. We need social protection, but at the same time, we need cultural transformation, deconstruct gender roles, and de-minimize care. We saw this during the pandemic. Men were in charge of that. Why can they not do it? Why cannot the state not do that? Promote the distribution of state care between men and women, but that is not enough. State and market must recognize their obligation in this, because we see the single person households. When the state assumes this responsibility, the country's GDP will grow, well-being grows, and with that, we can reach gender equality. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Lopez Montaña, particularly for highlighting the importance of rural women in the economy of caregiving and the urgency to change the perception of care. And thank you for your work on your development of these pillars to improve our quality of life. I have been told that apparently the Vice Minister of Rural Development of the Dominican Republic was able to finally connect herself. So I would like to invite Ms. Miriam Guzman, Vice Minister of Rural Development of the Dominican Republic, to address us. Thank you. Thank you all that are listening to us, and I apologize for the interruption and the technical problems we had here. But basically, the president was here at the ministry a few moments ago. That makes us feel very satisfied, because this means the A1 position that is being given to rural development. We as a vice ministry understand that, first of all, we ourselves, women in our governments, we need to somewhat modify our language, because we talk of empowering women. Women have been empowered for a long time. We have assumed our role, and we have assumed the role as we have participated. We multiply our participation. What we should talk about is participation in the economic area, which, as the colleague from Colombia that just ended said, when the roles assigned to us have participation in the GDP and we be economically rated, then we can better see our share and participation, which has been ongoing. We talk about territorial and land and planning and development. For rural territories must participate in the national development projects. Women are the ones that always see the development of their families, and they are the ones that promote migration in search of opportunities. And by promoting this migration, then we have the crowded urban areas threatening peace, because this threatens food security also. We need to take transportation, schools to rural areas, water quality to our households. We need to take industrialization to rural areas. And this will give us the possibility to have a population that will ensure the food quality at a national and global level. We collaborate one way or another with this diversity. We are working. Another element that we need to work on from within the governments is the intersectoriality in participation. We who have greater possibilities to coordinate because we are women. We should look for the different departments and find space working in the territories with our cross-cutting themes and issues. The fear we have, I guess, worldwide is the food shortage. And this is a big opportunity for our issues to be at the top of the list. And we must work together to work on territorial development with direct participation of women and youth and generational change. We need to work on this worldwide. Our fields are, if youth is disappearing from our rural areas, we see fewer possibilities for generational changes. Something else very important is valuation worldwide of agriculture and food production. For many years, in the economic process, we have managed this sector, and today, after the pandemic, we have seen that if we do not value it, we will continue to encourage rural migration to urban areas, and then we will need to invest where the people are by that threatening the possibility for peace and food security. Vice Minister, thank you very much for your words. I would understand you have finished. Thank you for your comments, particularly for the elements you propose to work on from the governments in such an important area as is agriculture. Thank you very much. With this, we end this block. And now we will hear our two guest speakers, two people of a high level who will refer to the economy of caregiving and its role in rural development of the Americas. As we have all been hearing, this is gaining greater visibility and relevance due to the weight and impact it has, particularly on women. I would like to invite Maria Noel Baeza, Director General of UN Women for for the Americas and the Caribbean, with a long track record in management and leadership, regionally and globally within the UN system. Amongst these, as Director of the UN Women Venue, Director of the Global Portfolio Division, Regional Director of UNOPS for Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as several other positions within the UNDP. Dr. Baeza, please, the floor is yours. Hello, good morning, Doña Patricia. Thank you very much for offering me the floor. I would like to thank ICA for the invitation, Mr. Manuel Lotero, Priscilla. It is a pleasure to have heard all the ministers and deputy ministers, particularly Cecilia Lopez, an expert in caregiving. And it has been a pleasure to listen to the presentation of what she is proposing for community care. And that precisely is what I would like to refer to. All the experiences that you have shared are very interesting, and I'm fully convinced that it is necessary to have a new generation of agricultural public policies that include women right there at the center, and obviously the gender perspective in all agri-food systems, in close connection with climate change and capacity building in the sector, and obviously at this time with the crisis of food security. For that reason, we agree as UN Women with this need, and hopefully that this new group of ministers, women ministers of agriculture and livestock, something new in the region, we are opening a path, having outstanding women changing this new generation of public policies related to agriculture. Allow me to tell you that a few days ago in Buenos Aires, we had the 15th regional meeting on women for Latin America and the Caribbean. This is a conference that has been taking place for the last 45 years. This is the only region in the world with a specialized intergovernmental conference for women-related matters. This is within the framework of the ECLAC, and we have been working with ECLAC for many years to ensure significant commitments in different areas that develop women policies. This new commitment we have in the region that arose in the city of Buenos Aires is a roadmap to create gender perspective care giving frameworks to reduce the big burden of caregiving that has usually fallen on women. Among other things, the Buenos Aires commitment highlights the need to adapt the regulatory frameworks that can guarantee the right to care through the implementation of policies and integrated caregiving systems, public, private, community-based, with a gender perspective, intersectoral, intercultural, and also based on human rights. The Buenos Aires commitment defines caregiving as a right to give and receive, and self-care also. Equality, universality, co-responsibility, and gender. In this sense, care is a responsibility that needs to be shared by society, by families, private sector, as well as the state. The commitment asks to implement and evaluate macroeconomic policies, particularly fiscal policies, from gender equality and human rights perspective to safeguard the progress already made and mobilize as much as possible resources available, hoping to increase sustainable public investment over time in policies in infrastructure for care, because the rural area does not have policies nor care infrastructure. And that is why we need to highlight the creation of these daycare centers and these care centers, as the Minister of Colombia was just saying, to ensure this universal access to care services that are affordable and also of good quality for rural women to leave their children and elderly adults and people with disabilities to have that time and participate in the economy. The cost of opportunity of not participating in the economy will lead us to very limited economic development and a non-inclusive growth. For us, it is fundamental to recognize leadership and the contributions of rural women and the importance that these women participate in decision-making policies and monitoring these commitments. So far, that rural women participate very little. They have had very little capacity building from the public policy framework. We need to revert this and allow rural women to be at the center of decision making, and this is something fundamental for all women. We believe, regarding community care, and in the framework of what we are discussing today, I would like to specifically highlight the advantage of strengthening community care for rural women. Community caregivers need to strengthen their identity as workers, and they need a society that recognizes and values their contribution. That is why I coincide with the Minister of Colombia in the sense that it is necessary to carry out time usage surveys for women. The surprise is it is up to 27% of the GDP in several countries where these time surveys have been carried out. So growth seems to be only on the shoulders of women only. And that is not possible. That is why we need those PCIs. First, we need to recognize that non-remunerated work is work. We redistribute it with men in society and obviously reduce it because leisure is also important. Self-care for rural women and for all women is fundamental. It is necessary to better understand the relationship between caregiving and the context in the territory, symbolic, culturally. This is all fundamental for care to adapt to that environment. The rurality has uniquenesses to promote social co-responsibility of care. Factors like distance, limited presence of state services, perhaps becomes a greater burden on rural women. That is why we must focus the investments in infrastructure and access to these services precisely for rural areas. There could be community initiatives too that could help solve collective care needs. And analyzing these community initiatives can bring learnings to the design and implementation of public policies and caregiving services. I am fully convinced on the need to link community care in rural areas with the caring for the environment and the planet. That is why for us it is fundamental to talk about the society, a partnership of care promoting participation of women in decision-making regarding the environment and reducing disaster risk, increase the resilience and adaptation of women, and obviously respond to adverse effects of climate crisis and environmental pollution in cities and in rural areas. I would also like to remind you that the women's political policy in version 62 in 2018 was devoted precisely to the challenge and opportunities to ensure gender equality and empowerment of women and rural girls. We recognize the importance of women and rural women as fundamental agents to eradicate poverty and moving forth with sustainable agriculture and development. Closing the gender gap is fundamental to continue to advance and introduce policies and interventions, and as well as innovation that can adjust all the policies to this gender approach. And that is why we see with great favorable eyes the changes occurring in this new sector. Lastly, gender equality and empowerment of women and girls in the context and policies and programs related to climate change are also fundamental. We cannot separate this. We need to have this broad spectrum. The understanding and the knowledge of women from Aboriginal areas is also fundamental, and this has to be also at the center of these development policies that must be transforming, inclusive, sustainable, and with gender equality, where social co-responsibility of care in rural areas is a priority. And for this, you can count on UN Women, and I thank you very much for this opportunity to have this space. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you very much, Dr. Baeza. Thank you very much for your interesting presentation. And you definitely posed a very interesting challenge to all of us. Now, I would like to ask Mr. Javier Pineda Duque, Associate Professor from the Interdisciplinary Center for Development Studies, CIDER, in University of Los Andes, Colombia, and also from Durham University in the UK. He's a senior researcher in the Center for Innovation in Colombia and is former director and member of the Study Center for Development. And currently, Javier is the coordinator of Glaxo's gender group, and he also has studies on gender and female empowerment, among others. So, Javier, the floor is yours. Well, thank you very much, Patricia. Greetings to Cecilia Lopez, the minister, and I'm very pleased to be with all of you here today. Greetings also to Director General Manuel Otero and to all the different ministers from Latin America who are present here today and all the different officials and people who are joining us today. Very specifically, I would like to talk about three ideas. The first is that it is possible from public programs to change the empowerment processes and facilitate the process of empowerment of women in the field and also to redistribute care or caregiving. The second argument is that there are certain experiences of rural development to change these power relationships and leverage the caregiving economy in the value chains. And finally, these processes for social change are sustainable as long as we can change the social organization of care. So let me see if I can share my screen. In the meantime, I'm going to continue with my presentation. The first experience, so we have two experiences, two proofs that it is possible that this is doable. Colombia had underwent a road crisis, a coffee crisis in 2009, where the production of coffee dropped from 11.5 million bags in 2008 to 7.8 in 2009. That drop of almost 30% made the national government launch a program for permanent sustainability and future for the coffee growing population to recover the production of coffee and face that crisis that was lived due to different factors and social factors as well, environmental and social factors. That program had that specific objective, but basically in the field, and without even meaning to do it, there was a reactivation of women that was that joined this process, and over more than 10% of coffee growing women were able to obtain their coffee citizenship. That is, they were acknowledged as coffee producers. And that is very important. And it is known as a coffee ID that gives them voice and vote in this guild. So, as after that process, we were able to overcome two historical barriers that women had in agricultural production: land ownership and access to production resources. That is a process that was studied in detail and that was also reported in different studies. I can share them with you if you want to. But there's an important percentage that represented almost 60,000 women that became part of that process and that attained this coffee citizenship. And this is something that it can be seen in three main pillars in coffee production. First, the economic pillar, as we see the agency, which is the most important thing from when we look at empowerment of women in workplaces, not only non-remunerated, but also in remunerated jobs, and also in health, in work, and based on inputs and technology, in specialty coffees, the capability of organizing women, and in the trade of coffee. Also, a social pillar in terms of the decisions made in the family and rights and personal time, and violence against children, against the domestic partners, and reproductive and sexual rights, and access of women to training and outreach. In all these pillars and in all these categories, we looked at the changes that took place and we were able to document them. And the last pillar is of good government, as it is called by the Federation of Coffee Producers, that has to do with the participation of women in public life of their communities and the leadership of women and the participation of women in politics, in of state or provincial governments. And that experience allowed us to show and give proof that it is possible based on public programs to generate change. This public program was a financing tool that was giving them a 40% of credit once producers had over 1,500 plants of coffee in their territories. How were women linked? Well, this was a process done in the territories, and that was unexpected at the central level. And so they were giving some of the plots when the plots were owned by men, and this was done and then it was granted to women, and they were given this access to training and to seats, and that's how they were given this coffee citizenship. Another experience was a Canadian cooperation program that was carried out for 5 years, which was the improvement of agricultural cooperative performance. It was called the Impact Project, and it was worked on with about 60 associations, cooperatives, and organizations that were related to agriculture. So basically, this project had 5 main work areas. One had to do with organization, another one had to do with marketing, financing, agro-industrial, with a cross-cutting strategy for gender equality. And this is what I want to highlight. From the perspective of organizational strategy, they stimulated for women to have a significant participation in the boards of the cooperatives, agricultural cooperatives, with at least 3 spaces. It was not enough for a woman to participate, but 3 women had to participate. So they changed the composition of the decision-making bodies within these organizations that were mainly male-led. So that was an important point. Secondly, to change the organizational decisions within these associations. What does that mean? Well, for example, in a milk-producing cooperative that we were able to study, the morning milk production was still in the hands of men, but the production of milk in the afternoon was in the hands of women. And that led to for them to be able to have income and be able to use this income for their own projects. So this was linked to an organizational strategy faced with the value chain in the production area. We work with, or they work with the production of milk, banana, coffee, and other products in different sectors, and how producers association were being linked into that value chain. This is a strategy that we know well about from the end of the last century, where we know that producer associations can generate more value, give them ownership to set value, and this positions them differently within the value chain and based on technological changes and administrative changes, and in the widening of trade networks and support networks with different public and private entities. They were able then to participate, have more participatory plans. So these strategies were truly important to be able to position the associated production and also playing a key role, or women and youth playing a key role within the initiatives, what has been called the associative genetics, to generate new production projects and for social service too. And that's why care services became so important back then. Those production models have been used in Latin America. I'm telling you about this experience that took place from 2014 to 2019. And in the strategy of gender equality, was able to change the power relationships within these organizations. So how is this articulated? How do you articulate this economy of care? And here I would like to go back to what the minister was saying with regards to the pillars of care. So how do we change the social organization of care that we call the diamond of care, where especially in the rural areas, but in all Latin America, has fell on a family welfare system, and within the families, women are the ones who are mainly in charge of care. So how to redistribute within families between the state, the market, and civil society. The strategies for this are first, thinking on ways that associations of rural producers, both male and female, can change the infrastructure of care. That can be done relatively easy through mappings of the care that can identify in each different municipality and place how we can look and at how the care services are established and how we can strengthen those, and then articulate projects and initiatives from the organizations with the public sector and with civil society organizations and support organizations and international cooperation into a new care infrastructure that has to do with all like everything that has to do with childcare, elderly care, disability care that are basic and that also can be much more also for people that do not have disabilities, because everybody needs care. So this can be done through community meal places and things like that. And now then we have another pillar, the articulation of care with civil social security and social protection systems. And this is very important because it relates to what Maria Noa was saying. How can we put into practice the right to care? In social security and health systems, that is not included. And so we need to find a way to include that. It has been included in social protection in the right of special populations, of those with disabilities and others, but the right for care as a human right needs to be included in social security systems. And that is important because the infrastructure of care requires significant resources. And then we need to look for those in well-being systems in general, or welfare systems in general. Then we have also what happens within communities. It is important to develop community care projects that may be relevant at the national level, and particularly at the rural level, and for them to certify women who may be managers of this community care in a wider sense of taking care of life. In Colombia, for example, during the armed conflict is still having some victims, and that includes many social leaders, even women who are defenders of human rights and defenders of the environment. So it is important for care to have these managers of care and even care for a daily basis. And we need to articulate that, and we need to create a certification of community leaders that can actually take care of this and that can be associated with this Association of Rural Producers. So a community care program would be very important. And the other pillar, it has to do with the program for rural development that may change the gender relationships and care at homes. This experience with the Canadian Cooperation Agency had a whole strategy for gender equality that allowed to bring men also here and help them so that they can participate more actively in the households. Javier? So those would be the 5 important pillars. And with that, I conclude. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you. I apologize, Javier, but we're running out of time. But thank you anyways for those very interesting examples that show that we can definitely make some leeway in this sense. And now Ika will do the presentation of a very interesting course, a rural women training course, a proposal to support the development of capabilities of rural women and also their communities. So I'm going to give the floor to Silvia Castellano, technical specialist of ICA, and Priscila Zúñiga Villalobos, gender equity and youth program manager from ICA. So please go ahead. Well, thank you very much, Patricia. Nice to greet you all. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that the Minister of Colombia, Ms. Cecilia López Montaño, wants to give a message. Yes, 2 very short things. Well, after listening to Maria Noel and Javier, it is important to say that care is not only has to do with children and elderly and those with diseases. It has to do with the entire human race. And this is not only because of the aging processes, but because of these unipersonal families. And also, since care has to be meant for the entire society, we all need care, the market has a play to role. A role of technologies, because care does not only have to do with personal care, but with everything that has to do within at home. Robots, for example, are wonderful. All the different things that you can use to reduce the time to do things. So this has to be a new production sector. And the last thing I wanted to say is that with regards to community work, we have to break free from the idea that women are the caretakers. And this is something that has to do with what Javier was saying. Community care. Who says that men cannot be caregivers? We need to break free from this idea, because otherwise we won't be accepted as producing women. And those roles are no longer reality. And we cannot allow for this to continue going on for the next 100 years. We need to break free from this idea. Women are not good caregivers. Caregiving is a responsibility of all. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Madam Minister. And so now I'm going to present very proudly the course. As we have mentioned before, I would like to thank our host minister, our director general, to all the ministers and deputy ministers and other high-level officials who have joined us today. And then definitely the figures do not lie. There is an overload of tasks by women or for women in rural areas. And aside from this, 50% of the production of food is in the hands of women, particularly in the territories where agriculture is under situations where women need to be included. Furthermore, some of the discussions that we have had is the need to redistribute care, to understand the role of women as agents for development in agri-food systems, to create spaces in decision-making processes, to generate public policies that may enable rural women to give answers to their needs. And that is why at ICA we have worked strongly during the past 5 years to be able to position this topic at the highest levels of decision-making bodies. And that's why in this third forum of female ministers and deputy ministers of agriculture and other high-level officials from the Americas. And through our equity and youth program, we want to respond to what was mentioned during the second forum of ministers and launch a proposal to train women, rural women, and give them practical tools that may support their empowerment and also strengthen their leadership as entrepreneurs. So I please move to the next slide so I can tell you what the objective of this course is. So what we want to do is to tackle in a more concrete manner and through the contribution to the strengthening of the capabilities of female or rural women through different teaching tools and learning tools so that we can implement best practices and strengthen their entrepreneurs and their leadership skills. Next, please. So, who are the subjects of this course? Well, through this training program, we want to promote some autonomous learning of rural women who may become entrepreneurs in small and medium scale so that we can add value at the local level and potentiate their leadership, community leadership potential. We can have women in the rural areas, women who are promoters of family farming, women who are entrepreneurs in the rural areas, those who have small, medium, small businesses, and those who are also students and that can promote the socialization of good practices in their own fields. Next, please. So now you can see on screen the different units that make up the course. We have called this Introduction to Entrepreneurship for Rural Women. Now I would like to give the floor to my colleague Sylvia to give you more details. Well, thank you very much, Priscilla. Yes. So elaborating on what the manager of the program has just said, Priscilla Zúñiga, we want to talk about the course, and it was something that was requested during the second forum of female ministers and deputy ministers of agriculture and other high-level officials of Americas, and now it has become a reality. So let's look into this a bit more. Next slide, please. So thank you very much. So let's see what each of the unit entails, where we will be talking about entrepreneurship. For example, unit number 1, the first unit talks about rural women, the culture of entrepreneurship, and community leadership. The main objective is to make sure that the student understands her important role within the communities and for her to obtain tools that may actually help her lead at the local level if that's what she wants. This module will give the students knowledge about ideas and proposals that will promote the role of women as local entrepreneurs. That's an introduction course, and then we are going to look at unit number 2. This is thinking about my entrepreneurship. So basically what we want to do is describe the different modalities or forms of entrepreneurship and support that they have available for the promotion of their own idea within the region. It seeks not only to develop and understand the limitations that they may have as rural women, but mainly the potential they have if they decide to become entrepreneurs. The third unit has to do with access to credit and the financing options that exist, because we know that is a common problem. So the idea is for students to be able to understand what their possibilities and limitations are whenever they want to have access to credit, just because they are rural women. And so they can then try to look for different types of credit, access to these credits, and the different sources of finances that they can have that may not be conventional ones. Now the fourth unit. This is the unit called the market approach or perspective. And so this will allow the participant to see how they can do a market survey. They can talk about the different tactics in marketing and also some services available to improve their positioning in a strategic way for their own business and for the services that they may want to put into the market. And then the last unit, unit number 5, we have the top level of development, which is adding scale. So they already have their business. And in this case, we want the participant to look at the options she has regarding the way to add scale to their products or services. And then for them to be able to see the possibilities, they have to link with other institutions and to see how they can do that in an efficient way. So in very general terms, those are the 5 units of the course. And so I'm going to give back the floor to Priscila Zúñiga, Gender Equity and Youth Program Manager, so she can give us some conclusions. So before concluding, I just want to tell you about the added value of this course. Why is it a different course? Well, it highlights the importance of understanding the intersectionalities of our target audience. We had adapted the contents to women who live in rural areas and want to be part of the agricultural sector. And we also remind them their potentialities and also how they can develop any idea that they wish to develop. We have a combination of theory, but also practice, where we give them exercises so they can think about what they are learning, so that they interiorize what they're learning, and so that the information is useful to them, and also combine things with times. So to conclude, we just want to go back to some important data. For example, where can they find this course? This course will be available in the e-learning platform by ICA as of January 2023. It's going to be in Spanish. So as we said in the beginning, this is the very first training program for rural women that we have within the Equity and Youth Program. And it is also includes videos, exercises, examples, and other learning materials that allow them to reflect upon what they have learned. And at the end of this course, they will obtain a certificate issued by ICA certifying their participation. And at ICA and from the Gender Equity and Youth Program, we wanted to thank you for your participation, and we look forward to your participation in this course. I hope you like it. So, Patricia, the floor is back to you. Is yours. So thank you. Thank you, Priscilla. Thank you, Sylvia. This course will definitely be some great support for rural women of the Americas so that they can become stronger and improve their livelihoods. And this is definitely aligned with what was mentioned by the ministers and deputy ministers during this forum, and also by our 2 speakers, as we think about the challenges that we're facing, so that from public policies we can have a gender approach and we can look at here as well. So now to give us our closing remarks, we have Federico Villarreal, Director of Technical Cooperation at ICA. Federico? Thank you, Patricia. Well, now I would like to thank you for this invitation. And I would also like to thank Ms. Cecilia Lopez, Minister of Colombia, and also Director General, and all the other different speakers that we heard today. Now, I'm going to be very brief so that I can also share my time with Beverly so that she can say some words too and give some closing remarks for this forum. So I would like to highlight 3 things that were definitely clear during all the presentations. First of all, we need to strengthen this scenario and its scenario so that they open spaces to women and their intervention in the different realms and spaces, and that is necessary for them to be present. Secondly, the need for education for transformation. When I talk about education, I'm talking about training in general. That is where what we talked about, the economy of care, must necessarily be part in a cross-cutting way and at its core. Something else that was mentioned that I thought was very important too was to strengthen the identity of women as workers, not only in what has to do with caregiving, but also as producers in these production systems. And then in education for transformation, we need to internalize and make it part of our common train of thought, the concept of the society of care under a systemic view, where we include different dimensions that have to do with production, that have to do with environment, that have to do with the needs to be a more egalitarian in society. And the third point is the need to promote collective action in all of this. When I talk about collective action, I'm not talking only about women and their interaction between women, but also the intervention of all the men who believe this transformation is something we need. And for this, collective intervention can be something that can generate this transformation, give visibility to the importance of this topic, and a greater transformational capacity that can become true first under this proposal by the Director General, as he mentioned during his intervention, that is to request financing organizations and other political organizations for them to be part of the agenda, not only of the ministries of agriculture, very well led by women, but also men. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Federico. I see the Vice Minister of the Dominican Republic, Ms. Miriam Guzman, has her hand raised. I believe she has a few words to share. Yes, please. Yes, we know we have limited time, but allow me to tell Priscilla regarding that interesting contents they are planning for the training course. I would like to think of adding a value and recognition specifically of the importance that all sectors need to give that participation towards production. We have gone without valuing this for years. The rural sector turning it into an industrialized sector, but it needs the rural sector. And with very little, it is very difficult to work. We need to give greater importance to this. And today we see that 85% food security depends on small and medium growers, and a very high percentage of them are women. So we need to focus on this specifically. It would be very interesting to include in the training course. Thank you very much, Madam Minister. Wrapping up, I would like to ask Beverly Best to address us a few ending words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Excellencies, senior officials, Dr. Manuel Otero, ladies and gentlemen, fellow ICA colleagues, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Indeed, today is such an inspiring day for all of us here at ICA who have been working on various issues related to rural women in the Americas that I want to start by paying special tribute to our honorable ministers, deputy ministers, and other senior officials of the Americas who continuously provide critical support and share the Institute's vision to enhance the role of women in agriculture and bring the benefits of agriculture to more women. As we now draw to a close, I would like to thank all our speakers and presenters for their very interesting ideas and for sharing information on the efforts for developing gender-focused policies in the agri-food system in their respective jurisdiction. Today, this third forum has really been a reflection about how far we have come and how far we still have to go. I am sure you will agree that a lot of work has already been done, and based on the range of perspectives and ideas shared, there is a lot more to be done. So the best is yet to come. By way of context, I would like to take a few minutes to share on the origin of today's event. You heard the DG spoke about this in terms of the resolution passed in 2021, resolution number 534, on the meeting of the Inter-American Board of Agriculture, where ICA was given the mandate for strengthening spaces for high-level dialogue and knowledge sharing with female ministers and senior officials of agriculture of the Americas by integrating a gender approach to various priority issues such as the economy, society, environmental issues, political issues, all geared towards transforming the agri-food system. So consequently, the ICA's medium-term plan of 2022 and 2026 and the hemispheric program on gender and rural youth are clear testimony of how ICA's commitment is cemented. And by extension, it allows us to carry out our work and our mandate on gender issues in a very systematic and strategic way, such as is reflected in today's forum. So from 2021, these forums have been institutionalized. It is important to note that the first and second forum of ministers and vice ministers and senior officials of agriculture of the Americas have already set relevant precedents that have facilitated and elevated the political positioning of gender issues in all our member states. In addition, they have been spaces, these forums have been spaces for dialogue to discuss relevant issues such as women at the forefront of the transformation of agri-food systems and the importance of the role of women in science. Similarly, I'm really confident that with the contributions obtained from this third forum today, the countries of the hemisphere will reinforce the importance of public policies with a gender-centered approach and highlight the priorities that the region has so that ultimately these same policies will be more inclusive for women and more effective for the transformation of agri-food systems. Having heard from my colleague Federico on the key takeaways from this forum, what are the next steps? Well, in relation to the next steps, I think it is incumbent on ICA to continue acting as a facilitator in promoting the spaces or providing the spaces for dialogue and reflection at all levels, thus institutionalizing meetings such as this one to guide new public policy towards the fulfillment of the 2030 agenda and to achieve substantive equality among all genders. Before closing, I want to reiterate my appreciation to all participants, especially our speakers, who have undoubtedly given useful contributions for the implementation of our work plan for the strengthening of public policies that focus on the important role that women have in the transformation of agri-food systems and improving their access to resources, their influence in decision-making, and their empowerment to derive greater benefits from their invaluable work. Since I strongly believe that innovation and transformation thrive on good ideas, I want to assure you that through ICA, the great ideas shared here today will not die. We will strive to ensure that they are shared, they are advanced to help our rural women to create businesses and jobs and improve lives. So in response to Minister Lopez, on behalf of the Director General, I would say we accept and will do the homework given to us today. So my final thoughts. Being a woman in any sector is not easy, but undoubtedly being a woman in the agricultural sector is really not always easy. But there are many, many opportunities and benefits in these sectors that we have to just forge ahead. The importance of women's role in this sector across the globe and in our hemisphere is indisputable. Hence, we must ensure that all the policies and tools are made available to more fully integrate our women in all aspects of our economies. Otherwise, I believe we will be faced with the impact of a current shadow pandemic in the future years. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you, and I now hand you back to Patricia.
Muchísimas gracias, Beverly. Y bueno, muchísimas
Thank you
gracias.
very much, Beverly, and thank you all very much. ICA, Colombia as host country, the Madam Ministers, the Vice Ministers, the Technical Cooperation Directorate of ICA, and the Chief of Staff of ICA, and high-level officials, Maria Baeza, Javier, for their participation. Thank you all very much for having been present and for your contributions. See you later. Goodbye. Thank you. With this, we have ended our meeting. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Excelente.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you all.